I told my husband I was sick and he instantly filed for divorce. I told my husband I had a rare, incurable disease, and he filed for divorce the very next day. He didn't wait for a single doctor's note, didn't ask a single follow-up question. He didn't shed one tear for the life we had built or the woman he had promised to love in sickness and in health. He just walked into his study, closed the door and called his lawyer. In court he took everything. He methodically and maliciously painted me as some kind of manipulative monster to our friends, our family, everyone we had ever known. I watched as the man I loved stood there, smug and victorious, as a judge stripped away my home, my savings, and every ounce of my dignity. He truly believed he had won, that he had masterfully cut a toxic person out of his life and come out on top. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly imagine, was that his perfectly executed little victory was about to blow up in his face in the most spectacular way. Karma was about to expose a secret of his own, a secret he had guarded for nearly a decade, and trust me, it was so much bigger, so much more destructive than my lie. For 12 years I really thought Mark and I had the perfect marriage. I know how that sounds, but from the outside we absolutely did. We had the beautiful 4-bedroom house in a leafy suburb, the 2 new cars in the driveway, and a circle of friends who were always telling us we were couple goals. I was the dedicated wife, the one who made it all possible behind the scenes. When his career started taking off, I quit my own promising job in marketing to support his ambitions. That was a choice we made together, a sacrifice for our future. Or so I thought. My life became a whirlwind of managing our home, remembering his mother's birthday, planning our elaborate anniversary trips to Italy and Greece, and always having his favorite meal, a perfectly cooked steak, waiting for him when he got home no matter how late. But over the last couple of years, a chill had settled into our beautiful home. The warmth had just evaporated. Mark disappeared into his work, or at least that's what he told me. He became distant, a ghost in our own house, emotionally checked out. Our conversations, which used to be the best part of my day, withered and died. Every time I tried to talk, to truly connect about something more than household logistics, I'd get a heavy sigh and a one-word answer. How was your day? Fine. Anything interesting happen? No. I started to feel less like his wife and more like a high-functioning piece of the furniture, a part of the scenery he took for granted. The loneliness was a physical presence, a constant dull ache in my chest. I felt utterly and completely invisible, and a desperate clawing need grew inside me. I just wanted him to see me again. Not the household manager or the party planner, but the woman he fell in love with. The woman he used to stay up all night talking to. I just wanted him to look at me with concern or love or even anger. Anything besides the tired, empty indifference that had become his default expression. That's where the thought started. It wasn't a plan. It was foolish, reckless, and I know that. But in the barren landscape of my marriage, it was a seed of pure desperation. A stupid, misguided cry for help from a woman who felt like she was drowning. That I sat him down on a Tuesday night. I remember the air was thick with the usual silence, the only sound being the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. My heart was hammering so hard against my ribs I was sure he could see it. I'd practiced what I was going to say 100 times in the mirror, but the words felt heavy and fake on my tongue. I told him I'd been feeling sick for months, a deep fatigue I couldn't shake. I told him I was seeing specialists secretly because I knew how stressed he was with work, and I didn't want to worry him. I watched his face for any flicker of emotion, but there was nothing. Then, taking a deep, shaky breath, I dropped the bomb. I told him they suspected a progressive neurological disease. Something rare, degenerative, with no cure. I braced myself, my mind flashing with images of what was supposed to happen next. I expected him to rush to my side, to pull me into a hug, to see panic and fear finally flood his eyes. I expected to hear him say those 5 crucial words, "We'll get through this together." What I got instead was a terrifying, dead silence. A silence so profound and empty it sucked all the air out of the room. Mark just stared at me, his face a complete, unreadable blank. There was no comfort. No concern. No flicker of love. Nothing. After what felt like an eternity, he just stood up, turned his back on me, walked into his study and shut the door. The click of the latch felt like a gunshot. I could hear his muffled, even-toned voice on the phone and tried to convince myself he was calling his parents for support, or maybe a doctor he knew for a second opinion. I was clinging to any shred of hope. An hour later he walked out, his face set like stone, and said 5 words that shattered my entire world. I just called my lawyer. The very next day, a courier in a crisp uniform showed up at our door, handing me a thick envelope. Divorce papers. It was that fast. That clinical. That cold. The story he spun for our friends and family was a masterpiece of cruelty. He told everyone I had faked a terminal illness to trap him in a dying marriage, twisting my desperate cry for attention into a malicious, calculated scheme. He was the poor, unsuspecting husband and I was the manipulative psychopath. Our friends, people we'd spent holidays with for a decade, just vanished. My phone, which once buzzed constantly, went completely silent. I was an outcast, a pariah in my own life. His lawyers were ruthless, a high-priced firm that specialized in making problems disappear. They filed relentless motions demanding my complete medical history, which obviously I couldn't produce. My lie was the perfect weapon for them, and they wielded it with surgical precision. They used it to paint me as unstable, a pathological liar, and fundamentally dishonest. I was completely drowning in a storm of legal documents and social isolation, and the one person I thought would be my life raft was the one holding my head underwater. The courtroom was a waking nightmare. It was cold and imposing, and I felt impossibly small. Mark sat on the other side of the aisle, dressed in an expensive suit, playing the part of the perfect wounded victim for the judge. I was across from him, the designated villain, feeling my cheap dress cling to my clammy skin. His legal team was sharp, polished, and brutal. They began by presenting a detailed report from a private investigator he had hired the very morning after I told him my news. It was filled with page after page of surveillance photos of me going about my life. There were pictures of me carrying heavy groceries from the car, smiling as I chatted with a neighbor, even a short video of me on a local hiking trail from a few weeks prior, looking perfectly healthy and energetic. Every normal activity was framed as proof of my duplicity. They had subpoenaed the records from the specialists I'd foolishly mentioned by name, and of course, the responses all came back with the same sterile, damning statement. We have no record of this individual as a patient. My lie was laid bare for the entire court to see, systematically dismantled piece by piece. My credibility was not just shot, it was obliterated. The judge, a stern-faced man in his 60s, looked at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. My own lawyer, a court-appointed attorney who was completely out of his depth, could barely make eye contact with me. Mark's lead attorney argued that my deception was a profound and shocking betrayal of the sacred trust of marriage, and that by not admitting the lie in my initial court filings, I had committed perjury. His voice boomed through the courtroom. Your Honor, if she can lie about her health, if she can lie to this court, how can she be trusted with any part of the life they built? She has proven herself to be fundamentally and pathologically dishonest. The judge agreed completely and unequivocally. He looked down at me from his bench and delivered a speech that seared itself into my memory. He called my behavior a shocking and manipulative betrayal of marital trust that borders on sociopathic. Because my whole case was now tainted by this initial catastrophic lie, it fell apart like a house of cards. I was ordered to pay a significant chunk of Mark's exorbitant legal fees as a penalty. He was awarded the house, the vast majority of our shared savings, our investments, and even the car I drove every day. I walked out of that courthouse with nothing but a single suitcase of clothes and the crushing, suffocating weight of my own stupidity. As I passed him in the hallway, Mark didn't even try to hide the smirk on his face. It was a look of pure triumph. He had completely and utterly destroyed me, and he was enjoying every second of it. A few weeks drifted by in a gray fog of shame and disbelief. I was crashing in the tiny guest room at my sister's apartment, spending my days staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out how to even begin to piece my life back together. I felt like a ghost haunting someone else's life. The court had granted me one final opportunity to go back to the house to retrieve the few personal belongings the judgment had allowed me. My clothes, some books, and a few sentimental items from my childhood. Walking through those empty, echoing rooms felt like touring a graveyard I had built myself. Every corner held a memory now tainted by betrayal. As I was clearing out my old nightstand, numbly stuffing trinkets into a cardboard box, my hand hit something tucked way in the back of the drawer, hidden under old papers. It was an old tablet. One of Mark's, a model that was at least 5 years old, which he hadn't touched in years. He must have totally forgotten about it. My first thought was to just leave it there. It was his after all. But then this bitter, angry part of me that I hadn't felt in weeks flared up. He had taken everything else, I was taking this. That night, back at my sister's, I found an old charger and plugged it in, not even sure what I was looking for. Old photos maybe? A reminder of a time when things were good, when we were happy. The screen flickered to life and what I found was something else entirely. He was still logged into an old, obscure messaging app he must have used before switching to the more common ones. And there was a thread of conversations stretching back for years. Years of intimate, detailed conversations with another woman. A woman who I quickly realized had his child. This wasn't just some sordid affair. This was a whole other life. A secret family he had been supporting and funding for 8 years of our 12-year marriage. My hands trembled as I scrolled, my blood turning to ice. I saw messages about paying school fees for a little boy named Liam. I saw photos from a business trip to San Diego that perfectly matched the date of a 5th birthday party for his son. I saw him promising to be there. Daddy wouldn't miss it for the world. I saw him discussing down payments for a condo he had bought for them. And then I found it, the financial trail. He had messaged her login details for a bank account I never even knew existed, an offshore account where he had been stashing a portion of his bonuses for years. His cold, swift, merciless reaction to my illness suddenly made perfect, sickening sense. He didn't see a sick wife he needed to care for. He saw a financial liability that was threatening the secret life he had so carefully constructed. He didn't file for divorce because of my lie. He just used my lie as the perfect God-sent excuse to get rid of me cheap and protect his real family. The anger that filled me was so cold and so clear it burned away every last trace of shame and self-pity. It was a clarifying fire, and it gave me a singular, unshakable purpose. The next day I found a new lawyer. Not a timid, overwhelmed public defender, but a woman whose online reviews used words like shark and pitbull. I walked into her steel and glass office and laid everything out on her desk. The divorce decree, the judge's nasty words about me, and the tablet, fully charged and open to the messages. Her eyes, initially cautious, lit up as she scrolled. A slow, predatory smile spread across her face. She told me this wasn't just an affair. This was a case of extrinsic fraud, a fraud on the court itself. By hiding assets and lying on his financial disclosures under oath, he had committed a far more serious and legally punishable offense than I had. My lie was a moral failing, his was a crime. We filed an emergency motion to set aside the original divorce judgment. When we walked back into that same courtroom a few weeks later, Mark had that same confident swagger. He sat with his lawyer, whispering and chuckling, and looked at me with an expression of pure pity, like I was a pathetic glutton for punishment, back for another round of humiliation. That confidence started to crack, though, as my lawyer began her presentation. She projected the bank statements from his hidden account onto a large screen for the entire court to see. Hundreds of thousands of dollars he had sworn under oath did not exist. She showed them messages where he discussed buying a condo for his other family, a major asset he had failed to disclose. Then she put up the photos of him with his son, smiling at birthday parties, dates stamped clearly during our marriage. The courtroom was dead silent. I watched Mark's face go from a healthy tan to pale, then to a sickly shade of gray. His own lawyer looked completely and utterly blindsided, staring at the screen with his mouth hanging open. I turned my head and looked at the judge, the same man who had called me a manipulative liar just a few months before. This time, all his fury was aimed directly at my ex-husband. His voice was low and dangerous. He asked Mark, "Mr. Davies, you are still under oath. Were you aware of this bank account when you submitted your financial disclosures to this court?" Mark just stammered, unable to form a sentence. The judge's voice boomed, "Answer the question, Mr. Davies." Finally, in a small voice, he said, "Yes, Your Honor." The judge then asked, "And did you disclose those assets?" The silence was deafening before Mark finally whispered, "No, Your Honor." In that single moment the entire story flipped. I may have told a desperate, pathetic lie, but he had lived one. He had committed perjury, hidden assets, and deceived the court in a way that made my mistake look like child's play. Turns out karma not only has a long memory, it also knows how to balance the books. The judge was absolutely incandescent with rage. He immediately vacated the original judgment, declaring it null and void. The case was reopened, and this time, Mark was the one on the defensive, facing court-ordered sanctions for hiding assets and a separate criminal investigation for perjury. When our assets were redivided, the court now included all the secret accounts, bonuses, and the condo he'd tried to hide. The new settlement was beyond anything I could have imagined. I was awarded the house, 60% of the total marital assets, including the hidden ones, and he was ordered to pay for all of my legal fees from both trials. He lost his reputation, a fortune in money, and every last shred of his credibility. His big, brilliant win was exposed for what it truly was: a fraud built on a mountain of secrets and lies. My lie was wrong. I know that, and I will carry the shame of that desperation with me always. Came from a place of deep pain and loneliness, and I paid a heavy price for it. But his betrayal was a calculated, long-term deception designed not just to leave me, but to erase me, to ensure his other life could continue without a financial dent. I had to hit rock bottom to find the truth, but in the process of digging my way out, I found my own strength again. I'm rebuilding my life now, not as Mark's scorned wife, but as myself. And this time it's a life built on solid, unwavering truth. So, I have to ask you guys, what would you have done in my situation? Do two wrongs ever make a right, or was this a case of justified karma? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you like this story and want to hear more, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what's next. Thanks for watching, and see you in our next video.